Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here representing Jason Blaha Strength and Fitness, and today I want to chat with you guys and gals a little bit about our training and going beyond just hypertrophy and the physique. But a quick reminder, if you guys will please click like down below, be greatly appreciated. If you're not subscribed or following, please do so, and if you'll be kind enough to drop me a comment down below, I would appreciate it so much. Let's get over to this, and this is again, coming from a strength background more than a physique or bodybuilding background, this is stuff that I tend to think about. And I do remind people out there, the average person who is training and they're training with for any significant degree of time really does care to some extent about being fit, not just being jacked. And this is something I think a lot of guys start to realize later. People who started as athletes, they get it, right? People who played sports when younger, they absolutely care about this stuff. But what we have is we do have a generation of guys who, they didn't do that, and then they get into their 20s and they start lifting or start training in their 20s. And I always remind them they're way behind the curve at that point. And a lot of them will get obsessed with, well, I don't care about any of that. I just want a good physique. And I'm not saying even machines and other stuff don't carry over. I'm not saying that strength and muscle doesn't carry over to athleticism, because again, force production is there. I am one of the first people to say that obviously athletes need to be gaining muscle, they need to be gaining strength. But I think what a lot of these guys are forgetting is their ability to function in the real world, their ability to function in anything outside the weight room. Their conditioning, their athleticism, their ability to produce force, in a wide variety of situations is not going to be the same if they're not considering these things. And I think what a lot of guys are forgetting, they get caught up in this, well, if we only care about hypertrophy, which is this weird selling point you'll see the bodybuilding type influencers promote, especially you notice a lot of the evidence-based ones, right? People who come from more athletic backgrounds and are not as much evidence-based, you'll see more of them are like, yeah, I don't care about that. I want to be able to run and jump, like they laugh at the idea. They'll laugh at the idea. And I guess the difference here is the difference between, nerds and jocks to some extent. But I think people need to understand it's not a compromise. Because a lot of stuff you guys see me do, I don't think I do any in this little set of training clips. But you guys see me these days doing sled work. You see me doing jumping, right? And I've always done this stuff off and on, even on my channel, because coming from a strength background, right? Even now taking up running. But I mean, again, are we going to pretend that these things don't build muscle? So that's the fascinating thing to me is, how many people out there are not realizing, look how many athletes are jacked. Like, is anyone looking at a bunch of football players? Even the leaner high school football players oftentimes are in the weight room and they're doing all this stuff. A lot of them, they are pretty jacked relative, to people who aren't training. But I mean, are people looking at the bodies of athletes and saying, oh man, they aren't jacked? No, it's the opposite. So we need to be aware your GPP builds muscle, okay? Your GPP builds muscle, right? Everyone gets that, right? They do know that jumping builds muscle, right? It's been pretty well confirmed. You do know that pushing or pulling a sled or a prowler absolutely builds muscle. Like we see it in the real world with athletes who get really jacked doing mostly sled work. There's been plenty of them. We see plenty of athletes who only do a small amount of squatting, enough to get really strong, and then they're out here doing sleds and jumping and stuff, who have jacked legs, jacked strong legs. And those things carry over, and I think people forget that too. Westside told you this. God, Chad Wesley Smith told you this, even who's not Westside. You're seeing a lot of these coaches with really massive squats who are like jumping, sleds, stuff like that. It's kind of important for an elite squat. And they all have big legs. So people need to understand this. Being athletic is going to help you be jacked. It's still hypertrophy, right? It's still going to put muscle on you. Box jump, sled work is going to make you bigger. Throwing is still going to make you bigger. You're still going to have a hypertrophic component to it, particularly when added into your program, okay? So the same thing with the exercises we pick. The movements that move your body through space. Like you guys will see me here. Obviously, I am doing some benching and other stuff, but you guys will see me back squat. You see me do a lot of weighted dips, a lot of weighted pull-ups. Okay. All right. And it's just stuff I want people to think about with this. Do you really and truly think that a machine or whatever is going to be superior to this, or trying to isolate stuff in terms of even muscle? I mean, really and truly, do you guys not think pull-ups and dips are going to build a ton of muscle in the upper body? Like if you did both of those exercises, you do realize your upper body, the entire upper body will grow. I'm not saying it's going to be perfectly proportioned for bodybuilding purposes, but you do realize, hopefully people grasp that. Pull-ups and dips combined together, especially if you get real strong out on progressive overload, there is not one muscle in the upper body that is not going to grow from that. People say, what about side delts? Side delts are still going to grow. Your only argument might be that you might not get 100% of the possible growth. But if you say they're not going to grow, you're flat wrong. Reality check. Same thing with back squatting. You realize you throw those three together, a person could get pretty dang jacked off of those three exercises. Right? Again, hopefully people understand this. And the same thing when it comes to even your big heavy lifts. There's a neural drive. That neural drive will carry over to your hypertrophy work. You give you more efficient stuff. But I think what people need to understand, they're so caught up in this idea that they're not going to have a physique unless they focus all on just bodybuilding type training. And it's just not reality. Tons of athletes have great physiques. And I get it if you're trying to be a professional bodybuilder. But I'm sorry, but guys who just want to look really good at the beach, like you could train purely for athletic purposes and throw in your hypertrophy work. And it could be movements that improve athleticism. Because again, the big barbell movements and then the movements that move your body through space, those are going to have a way larger carryover to your general fitness, athleticism, all these things, right? You're going to be more fit doing those than you are locked into a machine or isolating everything. You really are. Okay? I'm not saying you can't do any of the other stuff. But the same thing, all your other sports type training is still going to improve body composition while making you dramatically fitter and more functional. And when I say functional, I don't mean like the functional training hopping around on a Bosey ball. I'm talking about pushing and pulling a sled, doing a back squat, doing a weighted pull up, jumping, right? That's functional. That is what we mean by functional. The ability to carry over to sports, to carry over to any form of real world activity. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.